right, we're gonna wait about 1 minute and then we're gonna get this thing started. So thank you all for being on. Yeah, this is really a great time. Glad to see people's faces. Thank you for joining the conversation. So my name is Deborah Kinn. I am COO for American Caribbean Chamber of Commerce here in Houston, Texas. We've been in formation about 2 years now, and we are Fort Bend focused, and we have a global reach, and we are here. We're here to help, and we're here to discuss, and we're here to inform people about their rights and how to affect positive change in the community in which they live. And so I am going to turn the conversation over now to Ty Jones. She is our communication director. And we also have Constance, and she is our outreach director, Constance Jones. And they will both be moderating the panel this evening. So thank you again for your time, everybody. Thank you for joining, and we look forward to an engaging conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. And welcome everyone to ACC Presents Census Now, Gerrymandering Never, Getting to Know with ACC. I'm Ty Jones, the Communications Director, and definitely excited to have this conversation with everyone that's going to be joining us today. And I want to turn it over to my colleague, Constance Jones, who will introduce herself and get started with the introduction with everyone on the panel.
Thanks again. Good evening to everyone and all of our Facebook Live audience. Again, I would like to echo my colleagues, Ty and Deborah. Thank you so much. And thank you again to the guests who decided to accept our invitation for a very much needed, important topic of conversation. With that said, let me introduce myself again. I'm Constance Jones. I am the Director of Outreach for the Caribbean Chamber of Commerce, as well as a state officer with the Texas Coalition Black Caucus. And I will get right to it. I will introduce the panel, and then we will go down in the order, and we will give you guys at least 6 minutes. Deborah is our timekeeper. When I introduce all of you, all of the panel, and your title and what organizations you're with, then the next person to speak will be Lydia, and we'll go in that order. And you will be giving 6 minutes to talk about who you are, your organization that you're representing, and exactly how you played the role as it relates to the topic of conversation for this evening. So with that being said, I would like to introduce our first panelist. Her name is Lydia Azuna. She is the president of the Texans Against Gerrymandering. My fellow colleague that's also part of the Texas Coalition Black Democrats. So glad to have him here. He's the vice chair of finance. I will let him elaborate further with the other titles that he holds. He, like I said, is the vice chair of finance for the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats. Then our next panelist is Nabila Manzoor. She's the interim executive director, census director for Engage. Next, Tazeen Zera, senior partnership specialist for the Dallas Regional Census Office, Field Division, Denver Region, for the U.S. Census Bureau. And last but not least, one of our favorite state reps, Ron Reynolds. And with that being said, we will move right along. We want to give our audience and the chat room, the people that's viewing, to be able to chime in, which will happen towards the end. We want them to ask questions. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Lydia. You will go first. Deborah will be timing. You will have a total of 6 minutes, and you can take it from there. Miss Lydia.
Thank you, Constance. Like she said, I'm Lydia Ozuna, and I am committed to redistricting reform in our state. Our Texans Against Gerrymandering began in 2017 from a call to action by ACLU to get interested citizens working on redistricting reform. This past year, we incorporated as a nonprofit. Our mission is to educate our community, both here in Fort Bend, West Harris County, Waller County, and anybody else who wants to hear from us. We have a lot of years of studying. We have 2 years which we dedicated to studying the subject of redistricting, particularly in our state. If you will allow me to show you some slides, for those who may not be aware of what gerrymandering is, if I could share this, if you would let me share the screen, I would appreciate it. In the meantime, I want you to think about 4 numbers. The first number is 36. The second number is 150. The third number is 31. And the fourth number is 16. 36 are the number of congressional districts in the state of Texas. 150 are the number of House representative districts in the state of Texas. 31 is the number of senators, and 16 is the number of State Board of Education districts. Those 4 are what will be redistricted in 2021. And we depend on the numbers from the census to determine our population load and what the ideal population size is going to be for each one of those districts. Let's go back to the number 36. That one is the number of congressional districts in our state as of right now. Depending on the census, we probably will gain a few seats. Some say as many as 3. One of them may be here in Fort Bend because of the population growth. The 150 for the representatives for Texas, that is a fixed number, as is the number of senators that's etched in our Constitution. And so that's not going to change. Whatever the population is, it will be divided by either 150 or 31 to determine where those lines are going to be drawn. What is so special about drawing lines today that was not special, say, 20 years ago, is that there is very sophisticated software that can draw the lines wherever the person who is using that software wants them to be. So if you're standing in a street is the same, that software could cut you out if they didn't want you in that district. Now, when I was growing up and going through school and being a career person, our elected officials were using maps and they would cut and paste to draw the lines. Now they're using sophisticated software programs. So it makes it a lot more, a lot easier to eliminate populations that you don't want in a certain district, or add populations to a district to split them up and dilute the vote. And it's because of several things, right? The number one reason for gerrymandering is that a party wants to stay in power. That's the number one reason. And our position as a nonpartisan organization is that we don't care which party is doing it. When they do it, it does not allow our vote to have the power that it should have, because the election is handicapped by the fact that people are either packed into a district so that only one party wins, or they are cracked away from a district, which means that they are dispersed through other districts so that there is no power in that vote.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. Wrapping up 1 more minute. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh, no, you have 1 more minute to add.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Why is this so important? Because every issue that you care about eventually has to be passed into law by some elected official. And if that elected official is elected because his or her district was gerrymandered, their incentive to listen to people about what they want is really lowered, right? There was a study done by Princeton where they looked at 20 years of legislation that was passed and what public sentiment was. If public sentiment had zero interest in that legislation, there was a 30% chance of that legislation passing. If the public had 100% interest in the legislation, there was a 30% passing of that legislation. And there are 3 things that you can attribute that to. One of them is gerrymandering. Another one is voter suppression. And the third one is money in politics. That's why we are pursuing fair districts. That's why we are pursuing a fair and open process. And that's why we are advocating for an independent redistricting commission made up of citizens and not politicians to draw the lines so that they don't have a vested interest in continuing to hold on to either their party power or their own job. Thank you
so very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we will turn it over to Mr. Patrick. If you would go ahead, please, and introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Eronini. I am a nurse practitioner based in Edinburgh, Texas, South Texas, on the border with Mexico. I'm also the Vice Chair of Finance for the Texas Coalition of Black Democrats. We are a statewide organization that aims to stimulate in African Americans an active interest in governmental affairs. We facilitate the relationship between the Black business community and the political leadership. We also help to attract members, of course, to our coalition and educate the Black population on the issues that are very important to their communities. It's very important that we participate actively in the census registration because like the previous speaker said, it impacts everything that will happen in the next 10 years. It will impact the funding for healthcare. It will impact funding for education. It will, more importantly, decide how they carve the various legislative districts and ultimately who controls power. So the coalition has been very active in getting members of the minority community registered. We have had free bingos last year where we attract members of the community to play free bingo and of course educate them on why it's important to get registered and get counted. We have lately, because of the coronavirus, expanded to doing food drives where we give away food, free food to members of the community. And when they show up, we also register them for the census. The census is particularly also important because as we move into a new era of political, I guess, power struggle, as well as Texas becomes increasingly blue, it will be very important how the new districts get created to ensure that not only the minorities participate in power, but they do get the proportional representation that they deserve. So I'm not sure if I've missed anything else, but that's in a nutshell, you know, the role that we are playing as a coalition, again, which is a statewide organization. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we will move on to Tazeen. Is she
Good
there?
evening. Yes, hi. Good evening.
Hi,
Hi, Constance. How are you?
I
Thank
am
you
good. Thank you for being
so
here.
much for the invitation for this panel. I am Tazeen Zehra. I'm a senior partnership specialist with the Community and Partnership Program at the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm based here in Houston. My primary responsibility is to reach out to communities and create partnerships with them and encourage them to participate in the census. Now, this is a decennial that happens every 10 years, and a lot of federal dollars, the funding depends on the participation of our community. The more participation we have in the census, the more federal funding comes into our communities. Just to give you a little bit of a background on the census, it has been done since 1790, and it's a decennial, so it's done every 10 years. And in the last decennial, which happened in 2010, Texas received about $60 billion a year. And that was with serious undercount. Last time we only reached out to people geographically. So we saw like, okay, wherever the most population was, we would reach out to them and encourage that community to fill out the survey. This year, we're doing it a little differently. We are not only doing it geographically, but also demographically. So we have identified the communities that are in Houston, and we have developed tracts where we are reaching out to those communities within those given tracts. And in the last few years, we have seen a lot of growth in the population in Greater Houston. So we believe that Houston has a chance of becoming the third largest city in the United States. So we are competing, Houston is competing with Chicago. Currently, Chicago is the third largest city, but hopefully if we have full participation from our communities, we might be the third largest city in the United States. So why is census important? There are numerous reasons. One, this is in our Constitution. Article 1, Section 2 states that it must be done every 10 years. So the census is a snapshot of everybody living in the United States, regardless of their status. They might be immigrants, they might be refugees, they might be citizens, they might be non-citizens, illegal status, legal status, it does not matter. Whoever lives in the United States on April 1st, they must be counted. And the criteria of residence is 6 months and 1 day. So anybody living in the United States for 6 months and plus 1 day, they must be counted in the census. So it's in the Constitution. It must be, everybody living in the United States must be accounted for. And we bring billions of dollars on a yearly basis into our community. So based on the statistical data that is collected by the decennial, we bring federal funding for vital programs in our communities. For instance, for housing, for healthcare, we prepare for emergencies, we build schools, roads, and hospitals. So the programs that are funded through the federal dollars that come into our communities through the decennial is very important. Then, as previously Lydia, she said that it's also about redistricting, and it's also about fair representation of our community. So I can give you more statistics. I'm not sure about the format. Constance, do you want me to go on, or are you going to ask questions later on?
We will ask questions later on. Thank you so much, Tazeen. And now Nabila, is she there? We will have her come on and introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Nabila. Hi, Constance.
Hi.
So I am the executive director of an organization called Engage, and also the census director for a wider organization of a group of Asian American organizations that are really committed to making sure that everyone counts. And you've heard from Tazeen, you've heard from Lydia. I think what's clear is the census is not only just a survey that tries to get responses from different groups. It's really what gives different groups power, right? So by not responding to the census, we, entire groups and communities, lose power. And the way we do that is very similar to some of the things that happen in terms of voting. There are entire segments of the population that do not respond to the survey. And you won't be surprised to hear who they are. They're people of color. They're people who have low incomes. They're people who don't speak English as their first language. They're immigrants. They're folks that are not at the table, and they are not at the census table either. So what does that mean? What does that translate into? It means less money that comes toward them when it's time to apportion the budget for school lunches, for infrastructure, for roads. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's going to be a lot of healthcare funding coming through. So exactly those communities that need that funding the most happen to lose out when they don't respond to the census. And so one of the things that we're doing with our partner organizations is trying to encourage those communities to make sure that they take part. But it is hard because the census doesn't take a long time. It takes less than 10 minutes. It's 9 questions. You can do it over the internet. You can do it by phone. You can do it by questionnaire. But it does ask a lot of invasive questions. And when you're living in an environment when there is mistrust of the government, there is a pandemic in place, and you're just trying to survive, and you're really worried about putting food on the table as opposed to answering these questions that some weird, strange person from the government is asking you. When you're trying to find a job, it can really get lost. And so the challenge is that we as community organizers and community leaders need to become the trusted voices that tell our community members that this is something that is okay. And you can respond to the census no matter whether you're an immigrant, a refugee, you have status, you don't have status. It is imperative that you respond. And what we're seeing is, at least here in Texas, and even in Fort Bend, those tracts, those zip codes where we see many of those undercounted communities. Who are those undercounted communities? People of color, low income, immigrants, young people. Those are the ones that are not responding. So what we're trying to do is become creative and try to get the word out to as many people. Now there's a whole nother issue. So funding is huge, right? We want to make sure that our communities not only survive, but they thrive. And to do that, they need support. So of course that's huge. But like Lydia mentioned, there is this whole redistricting dilemma that is going to come in 2021. So what else is the census used for? It's used for redrawing all of those lines on the local, state, and national level. And as communities that are burgeoning, growing, our demographic is growing, we want to make sure that when those lines are redrawn, they're as fair as possible. And to do that, we need to get the demographics right. We need to get the best picture that most accurately reflects the truth and reality on the ground. So that's why it's so imperative that we get the census right. The census has been extended to October 31st, but that also means that the results are not going to come in the timely manner like they usually do. And that means that when we have Representative Reynolds in Austin working for us, he's going to be making sure that when the legislative session ends and those census results aren't in, that when they redraw those lines, they wait to make sure they have those census results. And they take that into account and make sure that there is no gerrymandering. And what is gerrymandering? Gerrymandering, very simply, is when the elected officials choose who their voters are. And it's on us to make sure that it's not the elected officials that choose who their voters are. It's the demographics, it's the fair representation, it's the accurate drawing of lines. And so if we have that take place, it'll most probably be a special legislative session that'll have to be called because the census results are not going to come in time for the regular session. And there's going to have to be a lot of testifying. So we're going to look to our community members to come in and testify. And they're not testifying right now like they were supposed to. There were supposed to be a bunch of meetings and those didn't happen. They've all been canceled. But we want to make sure that our members and minority community members are out there telling our stories. And we get fair lines, that our districts don't dilute our vote, dilute our communities. So imagine, so this is what happens in Texas oftentimes.
Okay, Justin, wrapping up, Ms. Nabila, thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. We just don't want groups where there's huge communities, and what they do when they redraw the line, they cut them in half. So what happens to the voting power of that group? All of a sudden it's diluted, right?
Right.
So we want to make sure scenarios like that don't happen. And I'll be happy to take questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabila. Thank you again so much for a very detailed outline of what it is the census truly is and how important it is, as all of the previous speakers have reiterated on. And last but not least, we have our awesome state representative, Ron Reynolds. If he would come on and tell us, of course, who he is and just give us a quick overview within his time period. State Rep.
Thank you, Constance, and thank you everyone for organizing this very informative topic. Much has already been said. I don't want to be redundant, so we can get to more discussion. I will say this, in addition to what everybody said, I can't disagree with anything. You guys are factually sound. I thought I was gonna, give some lingo, packing and cracking, and you already did all that, Lydia. So here's what I would add to it, and here's the ugly truth. And this is unfortunate, but I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna be transparent. Mm-hmm. The unfortunate thing is, the state of Texas, unfortunately, is going to lose out potentially on billions of dollars in federal funding because of undercounting. That undercounting is going to come because many of the populations that Nabila described, sometimes they live in the shadows, poor immigrants, non-English speaking. It doesn't matter, as you know, you don't have to be a citizen. But you remember, unfortunately, Trump was throwing it out there early on in the conversation about the census. Oh, there's going to be a citizenship requirement. Of course, the court said no, that's not acceptable. But it scared a lot of people. They were like, well, why do they want it? Is there someone knocking at my door because they want to turn me over to ICE? Do they want to deport me? All kind of things like that happen. So here's what I can tell you is that my colleagues unfortunately did not invest resources from the state like other states. So other states are helping fund these efforts, these get out the vote efforts, these education efforts to inform people of the impact of the census. Why is the census so important? You guys have talked about that. Federal funding, medical, the drawing of the lines for representation at the local level, at the state level, at the congressional level. This only happens every 10 years. So every decade. So it's not like if we don't get it right, we can fix it a year or two later. We won't be able to fix this for 10 years. And so I just want to emphasize that
Hey guys, I'm going to have to interject right quick and ask that everybody who is not speaking at this time, please mute. There's some people I cannot mute on my end. Thank you so much for your cooperation.
Thank you. I do hear that noise.
Yeah.
So here's the long and short of it. I'm going to tell y'all the ugly truth. This, unfortunately, is a partisan issue. It shouldn't be. It's just a total nonpartisan issue because we're talking about counting everybody. But I can tell you that some of my colleagues don't want people to be counted because the more people are counted, the more representation that we'll get. The more representation means the more minorities will have an opportunity to elect the candidate of their choice. And some people, unfortunately, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, don't want to see that happen in Texas. Now, why am I telling you that? It's because elections matter. Elections have consequences. The Supreme Court, unfortunately, because of recent laws and recent litigation, has took away protections that were there to afford protections for communities of color and minorities under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, a Voting Rights Act that was blood bought from people marching and dying so that we could have the rights that we have. I will submit to you, I wouldn't be the first African-American state representative in Fort Bend County since Reconstruction if it wasn't for the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act protects, like Texas, for example, was one of the states that had to get pre-clearance before they did these redistricting, right? Well, the Supreme Court has gutted the Section 5, those protections. And unless Congress reinstates it, which they haven't because of partisan bickering, we don't have those protections. So it's incumbent upon us to elect people that care about all communities to make sure that there's fair and equitable representation. So I'm just saying, we're gonna have to make sure that we get out the vote and vote our interests in November, because when we go back to the legislative session in January, and whenever we do take up redistricting, it is, unfortunately, I was there for the last redistricting 10 years ago in 2010, after 2010 and 2011, it is the most partisan thing that we do in the legislature. It is everybody's drawing a district to fit their demographic needs. So you see all kind of weird shapes of districts, horseshoes and all kind of stuff. And so I want everybody to be aware that this next election is very critical, not just at the presidential level, that is critical every 4 years, but the state representative and state senate, because that is who is going to be voting on these redistricting lines. That is who's going to be going and drawing these districts. And so it's so important that you elect people that believe in fairness, that believe in equality, that believe in minority representation, that believes in impacting positively communities of color and immigrant communities, to make sure that we elect people that are going to draw fair lines and not going to gerrymander so that there are communities that aren't represented. So that is the piece I wanted to add, is that this next election is going to be very, very critical for that set the course for the next 10 years. And again, that impacts the congressional, which impacts the Supreme Court, which impacts everything when it comes to making these court decisions. So I'm very thankful that you guys have organized this panel, and I hope people understand the significance of the November election.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Representative Juan Reynolds, and we appreciate your transparency and all of the work that you are doing, and you are absolutely right. This is a very important topic, and due to the pandemic and everything else that is going on, we want to kind of remind the constituents that while there has been an extension, as Nabila mentioned, till October the 31st, we want to make sure that everyone know about it and that they have actually completed their census. So with that being said, in the interest of time, we're going to pass it back over to Ty, my colleague Ty, and she'll start with the questions.
Thank you so much, Constance. And again, to our guests, if you have a question for our panelists, please type it in the chat box, and then we will get to those questions after we speak with the panelists. So we want everyone to, have their questions in the chat box. And my first question is to Lydia. What are the consequences as it relates to our legislative and redistrict mapping?
Where can I begin? Um, the consequences of unfair maps is that you continue to have elected officials that are not acting in your best interests. Now, Ron spoke about losing pre-clearance from the Voting Rights Act. And I want to tell you a little bit more about what pre-clearance meant. It meant that before they could vote on the maps, they had to be submitted to the Department of Justice. And from that point, there would be 60 days to review the maps by the Department of Justice. However, even more important, those maps were to be posted for the public to see and comment on and provide input in terms of where the lines were being proposed and how it would harm their community. Well, we don't have those 60 days anymore. And if they try to barrel through legislation, which is how the maps are drawn, is in legislation form, normally it's a very short process because the map drawing takes place before, and then the bill is written up, the committee accepts it like that, it gets to the floor, and then everybody in all those 150 plus 31 people finally get to see the bill. Not even our own elected officials see the bill before it hits the floor, unless they're in the committee. And then it hits the floor and it goes through whatever process it is, and bingo, within a week, it can be passed. So there is no time for people to review it and give input. One of the things that our group is doing is we are researching and studying what we call our communities of interest, and understanding what they are like, so that when these events happen, we can have our eyes on those maps and provide input. So if any of you would like to join us in this effort, in describing our community, in mapping where it is and what it looks like, and in asking these committees not to divide us, then please let us know. We would welcome the help, right?
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lydia, for that information. My next questions will go to Nabila and Tasneem. What does census data do? Nabila.
Right. So census data basically helps with everything you can possibly think of. Budget allocations, whether it come from the federal, state, or local level. How do we decide how much money goes towards our roads? How much money goes towards school lunches? How much money goes toward pandemic funding, toward healthcare? Those are all things that census data is used for. And it's not just used by the government, it's used by private citizens, by businesses that want to know whether they need to open a Walmart in this particular community. Will they serve this? Do they need to open a supermarket here? I live in a part of Fort Bend where they opened a new Costco, and we were told that the Costco used the new demographic data to look at whether they wanted to open that in that particular location or not. Census data underlies Pell Grants. You know, you name it, where is that information coming from? It's coming from the census data. And so we want to make sure that that census data is as accurate as possible and as reflective as possible of the true demographic nature of our city and our county. And to do that, we want to get everyone to respond. Otherwise, it's just estimates that they use. And we know historically, when the Census Bureau has used estimates, it has always underestimated minorities and people of color. That has just been the reality. And so we need to make sure that we're empowered by responding to census.
Okay, thank you so much. And my next question is, why is the census endangered? And that is to Tazeen. Is she there?
You're muted.
You're muted. Okay, there you go.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Ty. As Nabila mentioned, that there is a lot at stake if we do not have full participation and a complete count of the communities. There's a lot at stake in terms of funding. We stand to lose at least $300 million every year for 1% undercount. So if 1% of the population is undercounted, we will lose $300 million every year for the next 10 years. And currently, I just checked our numbers today, we are at 57%. So the state of Texas is at self-response rate is 57%. And if you look at the demographic of our on our map, 25% of the population of the state of Texas resides in Greater Houston. So if communities are undercounted in Greater Houston, our city, the Greater Houston, is going to lose a lot of funding for really vital programs that we depend, our lives depend on a daily, on a day-to-day basis, for roads, for better infrastructure, for healthcare, social programs, for education. So it's important that we reach out to the communities and get them to fill out the survey. I'll compare Texas with California because these are the two big states. California is spending $143 million to get a complete count. And the state of Texas has not invested any dollars in the complete count committee for the state of Texas. So we are reaching out to our communities to help them understand what is at stake. They're going to lose a lot of funding.
Wrapping up, thank you so much.
So the state of Texas receives $60 billion a year versus California that received $115 billion. So you can see the disparity between the funding between these two states. And we lose not only the funding that comes in for the next 10 years, we also lose representation. So this is important that we have a outreach to our communities and help them understand the importance of 2020 census.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, and please share this information with our guests. If you have people that aren't on listening, share this because this information is going to impact each and every community out there. So get everyone out there to fill out the census form. Like I said, it's only 9 questions. Share this information with your family, friends, co-workers, and get it out there. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Constance Jones. She's going to finish off with the questions, and then we'll go into our guests with their questions.
Okay, thanks, Ty. This next question is for Patrick. So you stated that you live in the outlying area, Southeast Texas, McAllen. Can you basically speak to the efforts that are being done, if any, the percentage-wise out on, as it relates to Southeast Texas, and how do you see the majority of what the possible percentage is as it relates to the census being filled out, and if there are any events or any ads or any engagement to get the constituents out there in Southeast Texas engaged in filling out the census?
Thank you. Over here in Southeast Texas, we are making a lot of deliberate efforts. We do have an ongoing competition among the school districts where the school districts are having school principals compete, because we realize that the average household in Southeast Texas does have some kids there. So by helping those children get registered, we register their parents, their grandparents, because these are generational families. So that's been done, and right now we're in about 57%. We still have a lot of room to go. We got the lawmakers from this area, the State Senator Chuy Hinojosa, Eddie Lucio, Oscar Longoria, and the Democratic Party chair. We got all of them together in a TV ad, and we're pushing the TV ad, encouraging people. We actually have the different counties as well, having their different departments do a form of competition. Which department is going to register the most number of people. And then we're encouraging the Chamber of Commerce, different minority groups to also put the link, the census link on their pages and their websites. That way folks can easily go click on those links and then get registered. Of course, we explain the ease of registration. We right now this week, we're doing phone banking, which is where we are phone banking the different individuals using political data, encouraging them, reassuring them. We were hoping that the coronavirus will kind of die down so we could do house-to-house block walking, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So again, by using local leaders, local advocates, it kind of helps to reassure members of the minority community, especially those who are here without proper documentation. It's okay. So we've made a lot of inroad, but there's a lot of leeway. There's a lot of room there as well. One thing I know has also worked for us is because a lot of folks are not able to put food on the table. We are working very closely with the food bank. We're doing food drives. So when we have food drives, basically we have a bunch of volunteers show up, 10, 20. They have their iPads. We have internet connectivity. Now there is no congregation of people in one location. It's a drive-by process. So they pull up. You basically sanitize the iPad. We give it to them. 5 minutes, 10, 6 minutes. That's it. Then they move on. They open up their trunks. We put the food, and they're gone. In a small town called Monte Alto, very rural area. 2 weeks ago, we did 750. I'm sorry?
I said, excuse me, sir, just in wrapping up. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Patrick. Now the next question is for State Representative Juan Reynolds. See there?
Yes.
Okay. So State Rep, my question is, what are the electoral and policy consequences of redistricting, which I know you spoke about that a little bit earlier, but I want you to give the Facebook audience and the panel, if you will, the real nutshell of the real true consequences, especially with you working at the state legislative level.
I'll be happy to. And let me just say this too for edification. There are 254 counties in the state of Texas, 254. Mm-hmm. Guess who's number one in census participation? Fort Bend County. So I want to thank all the people that are part of this, that have made us number one in the state of Texas. So Fort Bend is doing it right. We still have work to do to improve, but we're doing it right. So I wanted to let everybody know that we're number one in census participation. To answer your question, Constance, let me just be very, very blunt. In 2008, in 2008, President Barack Obama was elected. There was a progressive wave. A lot of young people were engaged in the political process, okay? Democrats did very well. 2010 was a midterm election. Democrats didn't do very well. And so the Tea Party, there was a Tea Party emergence to take their country back. They did very well in the midterm elections. Well, those same colleagues that won in those midterms, very conservative, when it came to redistricting, they carved out seats to protect them and their base of supporters. So they gerrymandered those districts so that many of the communities of color and communities of interest, they were broken up, they were fractured, they were packed into compacted districts, oversaturated with with Democrats. So so where you may have 2 Democratic seats, they combine them into 1. So that to answer your question, when redistricting happens and you don't have people there to protect communities of color and communities of interest, then what you get is a partisan process where people are protecting whatever party's in power. Democrats do it, Republicans do it. They draw districts that favor that particular party that's in control. So Tom DeLay, former congressman, he was the mastermind behind many of the previous redistricting efforts that gerrymandered districts to eradicate communities of color from elected candidates of their choice. So what you have now in Texas is very few districts that are very competitive. Most of them are gerrymandered that they're either Democrat or Republican. You don't have a lot of swing districts. So to put it in layman's terms, redistricting is a process where every man or woman is almost for themselves, and they don't really look out for what's in the best interest of that community. They try to select a demographic that will favor them to get elected or reelected. And so it's an incumbent protection deal. And so those who are in power, they wield that power. If it's the Republicans, they make sure that they pass a redistricting map or maps that favor the Republicans. And here's what happens. When you have to add districts and realign because of population, that they have to pair sometimes Republicans and Democrats into a district to compete against each other. Well, guess what? If I pair these two, then I can draw it such that I know who's basically going to win based upon how I'm drawing it, because you have all the data to show Democrat and Republican strength. And so the basic bottom line is the people who are in power, those are the ones who draw the lines. And that's why if you want people to draw the lines that are fair, then you make sure you elect those people.
Thank you so much, Representative. Now I will turn it back over to Ty. We will actually start taking questions from the chat room. Thank you guys for being so engaged, and we got plenty of questions, and we're going to try to get to as many as possible. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to Ty to start with some of the questions from the chat.
All right, thank you, Constance. The first question we have, how can we help others feel comfortable with the invasive questions asked? Do you have any examples? And Nabila, can we go with you to answer this question?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things we found is that when talking to people that are more unlikely to respond to the census, it really helps if it comes that ask or that presentation or that talk about the census comes from a trusted messenger. And oftentimes people are very comfortable with their religious pastor, the person who's in their mosque, the person who's in their temple. And so we've been reaching out to influential people like that. You know, when I go and talk to some stranger on the street and ask him to complete the census, you know, I might get a yes or no. But if it comes from the pastor of your church or someone else that you trust, then it makes it a lot more easier, right? It gives a lot of credibility. So that has been really, really helpful. And then our family and friends. If I text someone and we put the address down, my2020census.gov, we've been doing texting campaigns, but we've been using we've borrowed some of the techniques we use in political organizing. And what we do is relational organizing. If I tell my family and friends and it's coming from me, then they trust me and they're more likely to answer it, right? So encourage your family and friends to respond to the census, check in on them. The likelihood of them responding just shoots up tremendously if you do that.
Thank you so much. My next question is, if we know that funds will be late, does Texas have a plan to use general funds to compensate in that window? And that question goes to Patrick.
So again, can you ask the question again?
If we know that funds will be late Does Texas have a plan to use general funds to compensate in that window?
I don't know that. Probably Ron might be better answering that question. That sounds like more like a legislative question. I would not know.
Okay, Mr. Reynolds, could you answer that question?
Yes. So basically, the answer is that yes. The short answer is they could, depending on the priorities. The state legislature sets the priorities within the appropriations bill, and so we would have the ability to shift the funding around if there was a desire to do that. So the answer is yes, depending on.
Could you please mute? Okay.
So I want to make sure it was very clear. The legislature has the ability to prioritize spending in the appropriations bill, depending on the direction from the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker. The members both vote on the budget in the appropriations bill. We also do supplemental bills, so we have the ability to redirect and reallocate funding to prioritize or to if we're waiting on other funding to come in, we can fill those needs until that funding came in. So it's just a matter of the legislature making it a priority and deciding this is what we're going to do. We certainly can do that.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to Constance. You have the second half of the questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sai. The first question is going to go to Zane in the chat room. This question was specifically directed to you. The question asks, is the census the determining factor that could possibly push Houston to the third, I'm sorry, notifications bugging up. Could this determining factor that could possibly push Houston to the third largest city in the U.S. to add, if Houston is considered the third largest city in the U.S. from a holistic view, will more federal dollars be given to Texas?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much, Constance. When we say that we are competing, Houston is competing with Chicago to be the third largest city, that means that we need an accurate count of people living in Greater Houston. And once we are ensured with that complete count of people, and that would ensure the third largest city for the city of Houston. If Houston becomes the third largest city, we will attract the businesses. For instance, the Fort Bend County has already attracted Amazon to come to Fort Bend County, and their the headquarters is going to be in Richmond. And Judge KP George from Fort Bend County has worked really hard to bring Amazon in this area. So if the city has acquired that status of the third largest city, of course, then the big companies, they try to bring their business in the community, and that would open up possibilities of employment, higher rate of employment for local people. That would also open up other smaller businesses because it's attracting outside bigger business into this area. So of course, the community prosper from getting a complete count.
Okay, thank you so much, Suzanne, for that. And this next question is going to go to Patrick. You mentioned that exactly as far as Southeast Texas and where you lived and basically how close you are to the border. One of the questions in the chat room, and I'm directing it to you because of where you say you live, it says, how can we help others feel comfortable with the invasive questions asked? And if so, do you have any examples of how you can make the constituents, if they're feeling uncomfortable as it relates to completing the actual census?
Thank you very much for that question. Yes, we are tapping into other local networks down here. We are tapping into, for example, to an organization called Lupe, La Union Pueblo, which is an organization of immigrants. So by tapping into those networks, they know their leadership, like Ms. Mansour said earlier, they feel more comfortable giving very delicate information to the people that they already know. We know that have been through certain events with them, that have been out there prior to the census advocating for their interests. So what we're trying to do is use those people as references to say it's okay. So we have, like when we have the marathon phone banking, we have some of those leaders call into those areas. We are reaching again out to the, the local religious leaders, so that, when they talk to the, when they preach their sermons on Sundays or Fridays or whatever the worship is, they also make sure they mention to the worshipers that it's okay. Okay, your information is not going to be abused. It's okay to get counted, and this is why it's in your best interest to participate. Okay, so that reassurance has helped us. When we began, we were probably in the low 20s, but I know we're in the 50s. And like I said, we're being hindered by the coronavirus, so we're kind of trying to get more creative. We do plan to ultimately find a way to knock at the doors, because we have a lot of rural communities where they do not receive mail in their mailboxes. So we have to physically knock on their doors, because most of those get, the questionnaires were not sent to PO boxes. They were sent to houses. That's one of the challenges that we have. So somehow we have to overcome to, at some point, physically get to those doors if we're going to get the desired outcome.
That is excellent. And you definitely spoke to one of the points that I did want us to touch on, because it's a topic or a subject that's not readily or easily talked about as it relates to the rural outlying areas. How do we, as the ones that's being engaged, whether you're on the political side, nonpartisan, partisan, actually engage those people that are out in the rural outlying areas, because that is a big part that is not being counted. Like you said, the census was not even mailed to their house. I mean, to the PO box, it's mailed to the house. So that to me is like a big chunk of people that we would actually miss if we are not engaging or doing anything else in the community to make sure that it gets out about please complete your census. So I would think now what we would need to do, since there has been an extension due to the COVID, that we also remind people, like you said, with the links, that there's an extension till the end of October as far as that. So thank you so much for that.
I want to use the opportunity, Constance, to implore everybody to please engage your school districts.
Okay.
If you can use your school district to register some of these families, you find a big leap in the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you so much. And the next one will go to Miss Lydia. I would like to know, the question is asked, exactly what is it that your organization is doing next? What is next on the priority as far as what you will be doing with your agenda, especially with the COVID-19, to make sure that the gerrymandering and your pertinent points that you made earlier about what it is that you do, if you would just let everyone know what is the next thing that you will be doing that's priority as it relates to the gerrymandering.
Thank you for that question. The priority right now is to be prepared for the 2021 legislative session.
Okay.
And we're doing that by helping people understand what a community of interest is, by identifying them, by making them aware of what to ask from the redistricting committee in terms of what would be a fair and open process, because the process that is currently in use for redistricting is very closed to citizens as well as as I pointed out earlier, the legislators themselves, if they're not on the committee. That's one. The other thing that we are working on is education, education, education. I like to say that we want to be able to have the eyes of Texas upon all of those maps that are going to be proposed. And so that in a split second, when the map comes up, you can look at that map from your community perspective and say, that line is in the wrong place. It is making some of my people or our people impotent, is the way I like to describe it, right? So to us right now, that's our agenda, is understand what your community is, join us, and we will help you look at the criteria for that so that you can adequately describe it and talk about it. One more thing, if I may. Earlier, there was reference made to hearings that have been canceled. The redistricting committee typically has hearings in different parts of the state to get testimony from citizens about where they think the lines should be drawn or not drawn and why. Because of COVID, they were canceled in March. That meant that Fort Bend County did not get to have a hearing. And we have not had our hearing yet. And the latest word that we got is that all hearings are postponed, and there may be some during the legislative session. So that means that our voice has been stifled. So what we are in the process of beginning to plan for is to have our own town hall hearings so that we can have a record of what our community needs. We will turn them in writing to the redistricting committee, and we want them to be on video. I'm not sure that they will allow us to present the videos to them, but we will have them. And that way, if the maps that are drawn are not fair and representative of our community, we have a basis for which to contest the maps in court.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I do have one last question, if you will. This will be for State Rep. What type of redistricting plans do the court allow? As I understand, the court allows 1, majority, minority, 2, influence districts, and 3, coalition districts. Can you speak to each and which is in our best interest?
You know, I do. I have some notes, and I don't have them in front of me. Maybe I can get Nabila to help me with that. I think you may have helped with that, or Lydia. But I can tell you that there is legal precedent in terms of what the court does and does not accept. I don't have that in front of me. But one of the things for certain is that this Supreme Court is very divided, as you've seen, 4-3. And so a lot of times these challenges go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And what typically happens is in this last round of redistricting, that was litigated for years. We had the protection of a great Justice Department under Obama that was led by originally Eric Holder, the Attorney General, and then Loretta Lynch. They fought the state of Texas over the partisan gerrymandering and voter ID, all that stuff. They fought for many, many years. When Trump was elected and Attorney Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General, they withdrew that litigation as a plaintiff, basically as a party. They withdrew and left it up to the NAACP and Malk and LULAC to continue to fight. So unless we have a president in power with an attorney general that is sensitive to civil rights issues and voting rights issues and issues of minority communities, we won't have the protections to fight those cases in court. And organizations like LULAC and MALDEF, the NAACP, are going to be very pivotal, but we have to have the strength, the umbrella of the federal government and the Justice Department. The Justice Department fought Texas for many, many years. And so maybe Nabila or Lydia could expound on that. But I'm afraid that if under this current administration, under President Trump, you look at the Attorney General now, he is doing everything he can to enable Trump to do bad things. And then a lot of times they lose in court. But unfortunately, the Attorney General now is not sensitive to civil rights issues. So it really depends on who wins in 2020, this November, and then who the Attorney General is will set the direction for those potential challenges in the event that Texas goes in the wrong direction again, like we did in 2011. And so, unfortunately, I don't have the specifics in front of me in terms of the names, but I can tell you it's so important, not only who the legislators are in terms of drawing the maps, but who's in the federal government to then defend the maps. And then finally, who is at the Supreme Court, because those are lifetime appointments. And those, unfortunately, oftentimes come down to 4-3 decisions.
You are absolutely correct. And thank you, State Rep, for outlining that. I appreciate that. Also, before I turn it back over to Deborah, there was a response in the chat room, and I just want to put that out there, especially since you mentioned about Ford being leading and being number one. One of the persons in the chat room said Richmond, Rosenberg, Beasley, Kennelton, East Bernard, and Fort Bend County is lagging behind as it relates to the census. And they are suggesting that not only is it under Commissioner Precinct 1, but they definitely wanted to make that notation that those are particularly areas that is definitely lagging behind, and these would be considered kind of rural or on the outskirts, not definitely in the center. So we definitely have a lot of work to do. Before I pass it over, thank you again for all of our esteemed panelists. You were excellent, very good information. We appreciate you guys taking time out of your schedule. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Deborah.
Okay, well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much. We had some technical difficulties tonight, and we overcame, and we're here. So thank you so much. What a meaningful panel. I mean, these things, this information, we can disseminate, we can share, we can empower others. And I think that's what it's about, letting everybody know that their voice is important, it's needed, you're counted. We're all one. But we can't be if we're not here to affect change and to exercise our right, which so many fought so hard for. So.
Deborah, there's one more question. How do we stay informed about the map proposed for our community? And that will go to Lydia.
That is a good question, right? It is definitely a great question. I can pledge to you that our group is going to be keeping eyes on that. And we are part of a larger state effort that is called Fair Maps Texas Coalition. That organization includes our group as well as ACLU, Common Cause, Texas Civil Rights Project, Progress Texas, a whole bunch of organizations, League of Women Voters. We're all working towards the same end, to have fair maps. We have a website, and Stephanie, I believe, put it in the chat room. If you look for gerrymanderingtx.com, that is our website. We publish as much information as possible. There are resources there for you to learn more about redistricting. I have also posted my phone number and my email address if you want to get in touch with us, If you want us to come talk to your specific groups about gerrymandering, we would love to do that. That is our mission, is to spread the word and to help people understand the process well enough so that they can be active participants in it. And like I said, our group will pledge that as soon as we know what maps are being considered, we are going to be publishing them through our social media pages. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Lydia. All right, back to you, Deborah.
Okay, no worries. Again, you guys are all rock stars, and not just in your own mind. No, we're really so thankful for you for sharing and giving us the power to share with others. Because I definitely learned some things this evening. So, American Caribbean Chamber of Commerce. We're here in Houston. We're Fort Bend focused. We have a global reach. We're here for you. We're here for all of our members. And we're always open, and we're here to talk to everybody one-on-one about what we can do to help expand your business efforts. So in closing, I'm going to encourage everybody to like our Facebook page, American Caribbean Chamber of Commerce, also our Instagram page, ACCC. We're here, we give out updates about community events and how you can, we encourage you to like and share the posts that help others. So again, we'll do this in another 2 weeks. We'll have another interesting, engaging topic. We'll invite you. And thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks again. We'll be in touch.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.